fourth heading, subheading, was how to benefit from the lesson. How to benefit from the lesson. That was the fourth subheading. How to benefit from the lesson. So, along with what we've mentioned previously, this subheading, we're going to discuss some practical aspects on how a person can benefit from the lesson. And lessons can be split into two types. Lessons can be split into two types. General lessons and specific lessons. General lessons and specific lessons. General lessons are like, for example, lessons where you have like a general talk on marriage or the companions or Tawheed or just a general topic. You're not following a certain book and it's just like a one-off lesson or a two-part lesson and you're not following a specific text. That's what I mean by general lesson. In this type of lesson, the first thing to do is that the person should know what is their goal. When they go into that lesson now, okay, you have the spiritual goal, you can say, or you have the goal where you want to get ajr, you want to spend time in the masjid, and you want to get reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what is the goal of you going to that topic? What is it that you want to achieve by going to that topic? What do you want to cover? So what is the purpose of the lesson? And what is it that you want to understand? And then during the lesson, the person will generally just write down important things or benefits that the author, that the sheikh mentions, or the teacher mentions, or the ustad, or whoever mentions, especially those points that you didn't know before, or that you may think are rare to come by. Sometimes there may be something that he or she mentions that you may have never heard before, or are rare to come by. You think that, okay, I will not find that anywhere else. Maybe they mention a certain evidence or a certain point that you want to just keep in your mind, so you note it down. Generally speaking, you can't write everything, and if you try to write everything, you will understand nothing most of the time, because by the time you're writing, you're not really processing what the teacher is saying or what the speaker is saying. And also in these general talks, especially if it's a sheikh, like we'll be having the sheikh, the two sheikh that are coming, then spend a lot of time looking at the manners and how they deal with the people and how they act and how he answers questions. Okay, so that was general lessons. Specific lessons, which is more of our topic. Specific lessons, what we mean by specific lessons are lessons where there is a text. You're following a book, whether it's an aqidah book or a fiqh book or a hadith book, whatever it may be, but you're following a book, for example. So there are certain words you're following, you're going to read certain chapters and so on. It may be a short, intensive, two-part lesson, but you're still following a book, or it may be an ongoing lesson that may take a year or 2 years and so forth. In this type of lesson, just like the general lessons, you need to know what is your goal. But here your goal is a bit clearer or a bit more defined. And your main primary goal in terms of the lesson is to understand the text, is to make sure you've understood what the book that you're studying says. Okay, question comes as, how do I know when I've understood a text? Answer? Some of these questions seem very easy, but we've never answered them before, so it's even challenging to put it into words.
I think you can understand if you what you want to.
But to know that you've understood it, as you guys mentioned, you're able to reproduce the text or say what the text is saying in your own words. And number two is that you're able to explain the text, i.e., nothing from the text is unclear to you.
Meaning you can teach. No.
You can teach it, but teaching it is even explaining it is a bit. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to teach it like a sheikh. Yeah, but you can say. I'll give you an example now with some of the topics that we've covered before. But the main two things then is that the text is clear to you. There's nothing that confuses you when you read it. You can understand the words. You can understand what it's saying. The concepts are clear. The points are clear in your mind. And number two, you're able to reproduce it in your own words. Although the second one is kind of an extra step, because sometimes people will not be good at reproducing things. So for example, if you were studying the fiqh book 1, lesson 1 was conditions of salah. So you say the conditions of salah are 9: Islam, aql, tamyiz, and so on. To know that you've understood the text, you'll be able to say to me, what does condition mean? According to the fiqh. Okay, what does salah mean? And, well, not what does 9 mean. 9, everybody knows 9, alhamdulillah. What does Islam mean? What does aql mean? What does tamyiz mean? And not just as a word, like in a language, but as the meaning intended in that book. Clear? So once you can read that, that means you've understood the text. Now, once you understood that, then you understand that it does not mean that you know all the differences of opinion. So now, for example, you may have a difference of opinion. That person says, okay, tamyiz, some scholars will say bulugh instead of tamyiz. So instead of age of understanding, which is like 7, some will say puberty, which is like 15, maximum, Islamically speaking, yeah? By 15, they should have hit puberty. So either puberty or 15, which one comes first? Okay, now you have a difference. Why the scholars differed here? Now this is not in the book. The book just says tamyiz. But now you bring another aspect of knowledge from somewhere else. Now this is not the book. This is an extra level of knowledge. So we're not talking about differences of opinion. So for example, if the book, you're reading a fiqh book, and the fiqh book says it is haram to touch the beard, i.e. to take anything from the beard. Now, you've understood the fiqh book, what it says, that sentence is haram to touch anything. But then there may be differences of opinion. Okay, what is the beard? And so forth. But then you have like 5, 6, 7 differences of opinion. Now, you don't need to know that. That's not the level that you're studying. You're studying just the basic, the first level, one opinion. So at that level, you've understood the text if you've understood that. Or for example, another example which I remember happened. The fiqh booklet 1, lesson number 3. The manner of wudu, how to make wudu. Okay, the steps of making wudu. One of them is washing the face. Now, if the teacher says to you, the face is from here, from where your hair normally starts to your chin, and from ear to ear. Okay? That means you've understood the text. You're washing your face. Now, if you were to go into difference of opinion, okay, is this part considered the ear or not? Or is it just this part? You see this hair here? This hair, yes? The part there, is a part of the ear or not? Difference of opinion. Not the part of the face, sorry, or not. And this difference of opinion. Now, if a teacher comes, and as a beginner, this is the first time you're studying it, or not the first time, maybe you're just reviewing the text, and a teacher comes and gives the difference of opinion, that's beyond the level of what you need to understand at that level. Now, if you've done the book several times, for example, you know it by heart, then you can go on to the next level. But ideally, you should study the next book up. Understand? So if a scholar has made a book of only 10 pages, it's not that he can only write 10 pages on the topic, but he's done it to make it easier for the student. So if a teacher now comes and that 10 pages, he explains it in 500 pages, okay? And That's in a lesson, not a book for people to review. A book to review is different. But in actually a normal lesson in front of normal Muslims, maybe beginner students, then most of the time those beginner students won't know what's happening. So the student now has to make sure that his main focus when he goes to lesson, if he's doing, for example, Thalathatul Usul, is that he understands that text. So when, for example, he says, it is obligatory upon us to know 4 things. The first is knowledge of Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, and the religion with evidences. He has to understand what that means. Before he goes into different topics and this in 10-page explanation, he has to understand what does the text mean, such that when he reads it, he understands it. And you may think it's clear, but there's points. Like when he said with evidences, does that mean only the deen needs to be known with evidences, or all 3? So if I say that the person has to know the 4 things, the author says, the person يجب علينا تعلم 4 مسائل. It's obligatory upon us to know 4 things. Number 1, معرفة الله ومعرفة العلم وهو معرفة الله ومعرفة نبيه ومعرفة دين الإسلام بالأدلة. Knowledge. First thing is knowledge, and it is being aware and knowing Allah and the Prophet ﷺ and the evidence with the religion, and the religion with evidences. Now the word with evidences is it only for the religion or for all 3? Are you guessing or you know for sure? So these type of questions are important questions when a person studies Thalathatul Usul. Are not things that a person just studies and he thinks that it's easy. He has to know these fundamental things. As for going into depth about issues that there's differences and many explanations and so forth, and he does not know the basic of the text, then he hasn't really studied the text properly. So when he's learning from a specific lesson, then the person has to understand the text. And the steps, there are various steps for this, but we'll mention 2. We'll mention 2 steps. But before that, which is a side point of this first point, is that the person should stick to his teacher's explanation. As long as he's got a teacher that he trusts, then he should stick to that teacher's explanation when he's learning. So for example, if you're learning book X today, if you're learning book X, don't go on Google and download as many explanations for book X as you can. First, when you first study the book, study it only with your teacher's explanation. Because what will happen if you end up reading 10 explanations for that? You will get confused. So when you first study something, just understand it from your teacher first. Once you've understood the text properly and you finish that book and you want to review and so forth, you can look at different explanations. Okay, then 2 steps. We're going to mention just 2 steps in understanding the text. Number 1, understanding the issue at hand. Whenever you go through a book and you read a chapter or a point in the lesson and you're preparing, you understand, you can envision what that point is. So as we go through shurut al-salah, for example, you understand shurut means conditions. Salah is the 5 daily prayers. And any prayer, that is certain actions and statements that start with takbiratul ihram and end with taslim and so forth. And you're able to understand that if you don't have these things, then you'll not be able to pray. The salah will not be valid. And then you understand what is Islam, tamyiz and so forth. So you can picture each issue. You have an idea of what the issue is. Number 2 is that at times you will understand the evidence. So sometimes in the beginner's book they'll mention evidence. So you need to understand the evidence. And understanding the evidence, which is the second point, itself has 2 points. Understanding the evidence, which is the second point, itself has 2 points.
The first one was you can visualize.
So the first one is that you understand the issue. So you can envision exactly what the point is.
And then understand the evidence for that.
And number two is that you understand the evidence when appropriate, when the evidence is given. And understanding the evidence has 2 points. Number one, that you know the evidence. So what is the evidence? You can answer, what is the evidence? And number two, you can answer, how is it an evidence? So the question, point number one with regards to evidence, understand the evidence. Point number one is, you know what is the evidence? And number two, how is it an evidence? Just to make it clear, because this example will be easier. In the ayah about wudu, some scholars use it to prove that there's an order of wudu. So Allah says, O you who believe, if you stand up for the prayer, if you want to pray, then wash your hands.
Wash your hands up to
That doesn't.
That's a sunnah.
No, that says wash your faces. You're making me confused now. The ayah says wash your faces and the hands up to the elbows, and wipes your head and your feet
The ankles.
and to the ankles. Now these four, two of them are wash, then wipe, then wash. So this is an evidence, they use it as an evidence for order. Okay, so now we know that the issue is the order of wudu. This is the order. So that's number one, we've understood the issue. Number two, the evidence. We know what the evidence is. The scholars, imagine the Sheikh's teaching us, he says the evidence is this. So now we know the evidence. How is it an evidence? We discussed this, remember? So the fact that Allah put wiping in between washing shows that it's an evidence, because otherwise, even in English, we would join the washing all together and the wiping by itself. In English, your mom, for example, your mom will say to you, wash the plates and the forks, dry the spoons and wash the knives. She will just say, wash this and wipe. Yeah? So in Arabic, it's like that. You say, all the washes will be together and then wipe. You wouldn't say wash, wipe and wash. So the fact that that is in that order then indicates that Allah wanted the order like that. Clear? So now we know the evidence and we know how it's an evidence. So this is a key point, because many people now they say, oh, it's an evidence. But if you ask how, well, where did you get it? Where did you get the wajhul istidlal? How you take the evidence from there? They don't know. And that makes a problem, because then you cannot refute and you cannot discuss the issue from a ilmi point, from a knowledge-based point. It just becomes an issue of shouting match or whoever can talk loudest. So this, as a beginner student, when we study a book, we need to know what the issues are in the book, and when the evidences are mentioned, what is the evidence and how is it an evidence. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you need Arabic language, or you need certain explanation from the Sahaba to show you that it's evidence. And sometimes it's something that seems pretty straightforward, alhamdulillah. So those two steps are very important. And there's more than that, but those two steps are very important. Okay, the last heading then, after the lesson. Before we go into that, then there's another point here. Careful, or be careful not to delve into deeper issues. I.e., before you understand the text, be careful not to go into 20 differences of opinion on one issue in the text, and the rest of the text you don't understand it. Okay, after the lesson. So there's only a couple of points here, inshallah, and then we can be after the lesson as well.